The following program is brought to you by the Worldwide Exemplification of Freemasonry and made possible by the research behind the building series of Uncommon Catechism for Uncommon Masonic Education, Volumes 1 through 4. The views expressed in this presentation are that of the author and do not represent any specific Grand Lodge. Let's examine the fellowcraft work. Contrasting the first degree's internal know thyself focus with that of the second degree external know the world focus gives good insight into what is trying to be accomplished by its work. The essence of the second degree work is that of learning how to learn. It encourages Masons to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and for good reason. While the Entered Apprentice Work transforms the frontal and temporal lobes from chaos to order, studying the 7 liberal arts and sciences transforms aspects of these same lobes along with the remaining portions of the cerebral cortex, the parietal and occipital lobes. This transformation brings additional order to chaos, and in doing so conditions the brain to learn how to learn. Each of the 7 liberal arts and sciences transforms either a specific section of the brain or integrates the brain so that these specific sections are better connected to each other. Furthermore, the study of the 7 liberal arts and sciences trains the brain to recognize specific patterns that are found to be useful in further learning, understanding concepts that have already been discovered by others, and decoding the world around us. What does each of the 7 liberal arts and sciences do for Masons? The 7 liberal arts and sciences are a way of understanding the world. They can be broken down into the study of symbols as they appear in words and numbers. The study of symbols as words is the Trivium. The study of symbols as numbers is the Quadrivium. The Trivium consists of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The Quadrivium consists of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. What are each of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and what do their study facilitate in Masons? Grammar focuses upon word lexicon and operators intended to communicate meaning. Its study facilitates language understanding. Logic focuses upon truth and fallacy, supported by a process that determines each through premise and arguments. Its study facilitates both inductive and deductive reasoning. Rhetoric focuses upon a process intended to influence self and others through skill and application. Its study facilitates understanding figures of speech and meta-meaning. Arithmetic focuses upon number lexicon and operators, intended to communicate meaning. Its study facilitates understanding of quantity, relationships, ratio, and proportions. Geometry focuses upon numbers in space and their influence. Its study facilitates understanding quantity, relationships, ratio, and proportions as they relate to space. Music focuses upon numbers in time and their influence. Just as in geometric study, its study facilitates understanding quantity, relationship, ratios, and proportions as they relate to time. Astronomy, also known as physics, focuses upon numbers in time and space and their influence. Just as in geometric and musical studies, its studies facilitates understanding quantity, relationships, ratio, proportion as they relate to time and space. As indicated before, Masons who study the 7 liberal arts and sciences train themselves to recognize specific patterns. They also train themselves to recognize when these patterns are either in accord or not in accord with what they have come to know as proper in the area in question. This empowers Masons to better interact with both the world and those people who have or have not studied the 7 liberal arts and sciences. In Masonic terms, they are trained to know what is and isn't passable. Once again, the fellowcraft education focuses upon learning how to learn. This study requires active participation to transform the brain into a receptacle vessel for learning. Masons doing this work must understand what learning is, what they must do to learn, and how to constructively learn. Ritual points toward this specific learning twice, once in the Entered Apprentice lecture and once again in the Fellowcraft Staircase lecture. Typically, there is no comprehensive Masonic education dealing with the 7 liberal arts and sciences offered in or through a typical Masonic lodge's educational or support activities. To coach candidates on the work of fellowcraft Masons, as specified within ritual, coaches should be prepared to discuss with the candidate what the 7 liberal arts and sciences are, what each of them develops within those who study them, and how each transforms those who study them. Moreover, coaches should be prepared to discuss each one of them separately and assist the candidate in understanding what they study. Furthermore, the coach should be prepared to both discuss each of them with the candidate and to encourage them to apply what they have discovered toward real-world situations. Additionally, coaches should encourage and challenge candidates to create a project which shows they have mastered them. Preferably, this project will be of benefit to both themselves and others. How does a coach prepare to do all this? They must first do this work themselves. By looking back upon this work focus, I hope that it can readily be seen that the educational focus for the fellowcraft Masons entails learning how to learn. This process transforms the brain and imprints recognizable patterns that assist Masons in learning. It also integrates the brain of the Masons doing the work. This interconnecting facilitates the ability of Masons to recognize how patterns that might be attributed in one direction can be also attributed to other directions. It also assists Masons in decoding things that are unfamiliar to both them and others. Furthermore, this study also enables Masons to communicate what they will eventually learn with others, and in a way that will be fully understood. As was stated for the Entered Apprentice Mason work, this level of work is also a difficult task to start, much less finish to reasonable satisfaction, and is next to impossible to do quickly. If coaches don't encourage the candidates to do this work, the likelihood that this work will ever be focused upon by candidates is slim to none. Unfortunately, when a Mason does not do this work, he is improperly prepared to advance to the next degree. Masons advancing without doing this work miss an important aspect of their Masonic development, and so do their lodges. How can a coach tell if a Mason is improperly prepared to proceed beyond the fellowcraft degree? Typically, properly trained coaches can tell when fellowcraft Masons have not completed this level of work. They notice that the candidates are plagued by signs. They have a poor command of language and its subtleties. Their use of logic is flawed, and they don't recognize or understand this fact. They tend to take things too literally most always, and rarely figuratively. They cannot understand how they are influenced or how they are manipulated by others. Their understanding and application of arithmetic is at only the most basic level. They have little understanding of geometric principles. Their understanding of the rhythms and harmonies that surround them are limited to recognizing only the melodies. They are not capable of any deep historical tracking or future projecting. In short, they are not able to either communicate or understand the world around them beyond the most rudimentary aspects. Should Masons do the fellowcraft work, they will have indeed raised themselves toward mastery by transforming their thinking from chaos to order, thus preparing themselves to travel the many worlds that Masonic training opens up to them. Examining the master's work, it may not readily be seen that the educational focus for such work entails both learning and teaching, which includes putting the finishing touches on learning how to teach others. To accomplish the former, Masons must establish and execute a plan to learn what must be learned. This includes facets of philosophy and theology, and there are countless facets to consider. To accomplish the latter, Masons must understand what nurturing is, what they must do to nurture others, and how to constructively nurture others. This entails active participation in both applying what was already learned and transforming behavior toward what helps nurture other men. Ritual also points Master Masons toward what they should learn. It points toward specific learning in its presentation of the monitorial emblems. It is unfortunate that there are no comprehensive educational programs dealing with the monitorial emblems and what work they point toward being offered in or through a typical Masonic lodge's educational or support activities. The good news is that if Masons have done the work of the previous degrees, Master Masons should be fully capable of both discovering and understanding what the monitorial emblems point toward, and they will engage themselves in these directions accordingly. What does the Master Mason work do to the brain? It does several things. From the vantage point of learning, it increases, refines, improves, and integrates new information that Masons study. It also strengthens it by efforts to teach others. There is an old saying, the best way to learn something is to teach it. This saying applies to what Master Masons do with what they've acquired. If they want to discover how well they actually know something, all they have to do is try to teach it to another human being. Very quickly, they will discover how well they understand whatever they profess they know. Coaches should note one important aspect of ritual. Ritual legend points toward what occurs to Masons who refuse to complete the work of the previous degrees and who demand the same rights, lights, and benefits of those who do complete the work. If you're interested in the background behind Masonic education, as I've shared it here, you have no further to look than our Athenian roots. From what I've discovered, it was influenced by those great works of Greek philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, but most especially the writings of Plato. It was Plato's Republic that outlined the educational requirements of two specific classes of citizens, the guardians and the philosopher kings. Reviewing what was written in his work, Masons can gather very quickly some startling correlations to what is pointed toward in Masonic ritual. The education of the entered apprentices closely mimics that of the guardians as depicted in the Republic. The education of fellowcrafts closely mimics that of the philosopher kings as depicted in the Republic. Light and darkness, the point within a circle, and the division between being of the temple and outside the temple strongly allude to his allegory of the cave. Furthermore, it was during the time of Plato and Aristotle that the foundation of the liberal arts and sciences was first established in their schools. Years later, the 7 liberal arts and sciences were used in medieval preparatory schools. Students were required to study them to prepare for eventual scholastic involvement. It was through the use of scholasticism that both philosophy and theology were studied, understood, and reconciled. If you haven't connected the dots on this, let me state it. Masonic training, as pointed to toward ritual, prepares Masons to better understand their chosen faith. The road to that better understanding requires them to unburden themselves of vices and superfluities, strengthen themselves with virtue, and transform their minds into vessels capable of detecting and understanding the subtle nuances so prolific within philosophical and theological writings. Additionally, the same training enables Masons to better understand all the possible philosophies and theologies they may encounter in their travels.